Everything changed the afternoon my attorney slid a thick manila folder across the polished conference table and quietly said, "She's been planning this for months, but she has no idea you've already figured it out." I stared at the folder without touching it. Through the office window, downtown Franklin looked exactly the way it always had. Cars rolled past, people hurried along the sidewalks, and construction cranes stretched into the Tennessee sky. Outside, life was moving forward. Mine had already stopped. Inside the folder were bank statements I had never seen, surveillance photographs, and copies of financial documents carrying my wife's signature. Lauren hadn't stumbled into an affair because she was unhappy. She had built an entirely separate life while looking me in the eyes every morning and telling me our marriage was worth fighting for. My attorney let the silence settle before speaking again. She was preparing her exit long before she confessed. I slowly opened the folder, each page replacing another memory I thought I understood. Every hidden transfer, every unfamiliar account, every photograph confirmed the same truth. None of this had been impulsive. It had been organized. Sitting in that conference room, I realized something I hadn't been ready to admit. There wasn't an old life waiting for me outside that office. The man who had walked in believing he was trying to save his marriage no longer existed. Before all of this, I believed our life in Franklin, Tennessee, was the kind people quietly envied. It wasn't extravagant, but it was stable. I managed commercial construction projects across Middle Tennessee, spending my days solving problems that had clear answers. Lauren had stepped away from her interior design career after our second child was born, saying she wanted to be there for every milestone. I respected that decision because we had made it together. Our weeks followed familiar routines. I left before sunrise with a travel mug of coffee while Lauren got the kids ready for school. Evenings were filled with homework at the kitchen table, family dinners, and conversations about ordinary things. Saturdays belonged to soccer games, grocery shopping, and projects around the house. Sundays meant church, lunch with friends, and preparing for another busy week. It wasn't exciting, but I thought that was what a good marriage eventually became, steady instead of dramatic. The changes came so gradually that they barely registered. Lauren joined a Pilates studio because she wanted to do something for herself. Soon there were charity luncheons, wine nights, fundraising committees, and weekend events that somehow never included spouses. She bought new dresses, started paying closer attention to her appearance, and laughed more often when she checked her phone. Every explanation sounded reasonable on its own. Looking back now, I can list dozens of moments that should have made me stop and ask questions. Instead, I convinced myself I was watching my wife rediscover the parts of herself that motherhood had pushed aside. I thought I was supporting her. I never considered I was giving her the freedom to build a life that no longer included me. The first crack appeared so quietly that I almost dismissed it. While reviewing our monthly credit card statement, I noticed restaurant charges from places Lauren had never mentioned. They weren't expensive enough to trigger concern, just unfamiliar. A few days later, I saw rideshare receipts late at night, ending in neighborhoods where we didn't know anyone. When I casually asked about them, she answered without hesitation. A charity planning committee had started meeting across town, and parking was difficult. It sounded believable, so I let it go. Then other details began stacking together. She added a passcode to her phone after years of leaving it on the kitchen counter. New dresses arrived without discussion. Her perfume changed. She smiled at incoming messages, only to turn the screen away the moment I walked into the room. None of those things proved anything by themselves. I kept telling myself that suspicious husbands destroyed good marriages by imagining problems that didn't exist. Everything changed one Saturday evening. Lauren was upstairs taking a shower after returning from another fundraiser, and her smartwatch buzzed where she had left it charging beside the sink. I wasn't trying to invade her privacy. I only glanced because I thought it might be one of the kids' school notifications. Instead, I saw a message from someone named Ryan. "I can't stop thinking about last night. Wish you were here instead of home." There was nothing vague about those words. My stomach tightened, but my mind became strangely calm. In a single moment, every late meeting, every hidden smile, every unexplained charge stopped looking like separate coincidences. They became pieces of one story. And for the first time, I understood exactly what I was looking at. Lauren admitted the affair 3 nights later, sitting across from me at our kitchen table after the children had gone to bed. She cried, apologized, and repeated that she never intended for anyone to get hurt. Then she said something I never could have anticipated. She told me she loved Ryan, but she also loved me. She didn't want a divorce. She wanted an open marriage, insisting that modern relationships didn't have to follow old rules. According to her, we could build a new arrangement where everyone remained happy, especially the children. She spoke calmly, as though she had rehearsed every sentence before walking into the room. I listened without interrupting. Months earlier, I would have argued, demanded explanations, or tried to convince her we could repair what had been broken. Instead, I simply watched her. She mistook my silence for consideration, never realizing something inside me had already shifted beyond repair. When she finally stopped talking, I nodded once and told her I needed time to think. Relief immediately crossed her face. She believed I was weighing her proposal instead of accepting the end of our marriage. That was the moment everything changed inside me. If you've made it this far, this story clearly caught your attention. If you're enjoying it, drop a like on the video. It helps me see what kind of stories you want more of next. Let's keep going. I didn't stop loving my wife because of the affair. I stopped believing anything she said after she tried to make betrayal sound reasonable. From that night forward, I abandoned every hope of saving our marriage. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't interested in revenge either. I had only one objective left. Whatever happened next would happen on my terms, and Lauren would never see it coming. The following Monday, I met with a family attorney before sunrise, parking 3 blocks away so nobody would recognize my truck. By the end of that meeting, I had retained both legal counsel and a licensed private investigator. When I returned home, nothing about my behavior changed. I told Lauren I was still thinking about her proposal and needed patience while I sorted through my feelings. She accepted that explanation without hesitation. Within days, she became noticeably more relaxed, convinced she had bought herself time. Her confidence made her careless. Every charity meeting, every supposed girls' weekend, every last-minute dinner became another entry in a growing file. I documented dates, receipts, travel times, and every occasion she missed with our children. While she invested more energy into protecting her double life, I quietly built a record of reality. 6 weeks later, my investigator called with news I hadn't expected. The affair was only part of the story. Lauren had opened 2 financial accounts in another bank months before confessing anything to me. Small transfers had been leaving our joint savings regularly, carefully spaced apart so they wouldn't attract attention. She had also consulted a real estate agent about renting a condominium after separating from me. As I read the investigator's report, I understood something painful but necessary. Lauren hadn't been deciding whether to leave me. She had already decided. The only question she was trying to answer was how much of our family's future she could take with her before I discovered the truth. By the time autumn arrived, the situation had grown far beyond a failing marriage. My workdays no longer ended at the office. I rearranged construction schedules so I could pick up the kids from school, attend parent-teacher conferences, drive them to soccer practice, and make sure homework was finished before bedtime. Lauren's calendar became increasingly unpredictable, leaving me to handle responsibilities she once insisted were too important to miss. I never complained. I simply adjusted, knowing every routine I maintained would eventually matter. My attorney coordinated with a forensic accountant to trace every transfer from our joint accounts, while the investigator continued documenting Lauren's movements. School attendance records showed which parent consistently appeared for conferences and events. Babysitters confirmed the evenings Lauren claimed to be volunteering. Security camera footage established the time she left and returned home. Credit card statements matched hotel receipts and restaurant visits already listed in the investigator's reports. Even neighbors unknowingly helped by recalling nights they saw unfamiliar vehicles parked outside our house after I had left for work. The evidence wasn't built around one dramatic moment. It was built from ordinary facts collected over months, each one reinforcing the next until the pattern became impossible to dismiss. What had started as the heartbreak of discovering an affair had evolved into something much larger. This was no longer simply the story of a husband betrayed by his wife. It was becoming the documented history of decisions that would shape the future of 2 children, their home, and every legal outcome that followed. Nearly 5 months after Lauren first asked for an open marriage, she invited me to sit with her at the kitchen table after the children had gone upstairs. She poured us both coffee, smiled with a confidence I hadn't seen in months, and began talking about how relationships were evolving. According to her, traditional marriage was outdated, while honest couples learned to redefine commitment instead of ending it. She spoke about trust, communication, and personal freedom as though those words erased everything she had already done. Listening to her, I realized she genuinely believed I was close to accepting the future she had imagined. I waited until she finished every sentence before answering. There was no anger left in my voice, only certainty. My decision was made a long time ago, I said quietly. She smiled, assuming I was finally agreeing with her. I'm glad, she replied. I knew you'd eventually understand. I looked directly at her for the first time that evening. You misunderstood what I meant. The smile disappeared. Before she could ask another question, I stood, collected my keys, and walked toward the front door. My attorney had instructed me to stay away from the house for several hours while the remaining arrangements were completed. Lauren watched me leave without understanding why. Later that afternoon, she returned from meeting Ryan and found most of my personal belongings gone. Waiting on the kitchen counter was a sealed envelope from my attorney. Inside were the divorce papers she never believed she would receive. Once the divorce papers were served, events unfolded with a momentum that no one could stop. I didn't launch public accusations or argue with Lauren about what had happened. There was no need. Months of documentation spoke more clearly than emotion ever could. My attorney submitted the investigator's reports alongside financial records, calendars, parenting logs, and witness statements. Every document reinforced the same pattern. While I had focused on providing stability for our children, Lauren had devoted her time and attention elsewhere. She tried to explain the hidden accounts as harmless savings and dismissed the transfers as temporary financial planning. She insisted the affair had never affected her role as a mother. But every explanation collided with another piece of evidence. Missed soccer games matched restaurant receipts. School recitals she claimed to have attended were contradicted by security footage and babysitter records. Bank statements confirmed withdrawals that corresponded with deposits into accounts she never disclosed. The courtroom remained remarkably quiet throughout most of the hearings. There were no dramatic confrontations or emotional speeches. Instead, the evidence formed a timeline so consistent that each new exhibit strengthened the previous one. Watching it unfold, I realized I wasn't witnessing Lauren's mistakes being exposed. I was watching months of careful preparation accomplish exactly what it had been intended to do. By the end of the proceedings, the court saw the same picture I had quietly assembled long before anyone else understood what was happening. The final hearing lasted less than 2 hours. By then, very little remained for either side to argue. The judge had already reviewed months of financial records, parenting schedules, investigator reports, and testimony from the professionals involved. Every document pointed toward the same conclusion. While Lauren had been investing her energy into maintaining an affair and preparing a separate future, I had become the parent consistently present for our children's daily lives. The contrast wasn't created by clever arguments in court. It had been established long before either of us entered the courtroom. When the ruling was read, I was awarded primary physical custody of our 2 children. Lauren received scheduled parenting time, but her financial claims were significantly reduced after the court considered the concealed accounts and unauthorized transfers from our shared savings. Responsibility for the children's routines, education, and medical decisions remained primarily with me, reflecting the role I had already been fulfilling for months before the divorce. People often imagine a courtroom victory feels satisfying. Mine didn't. As the judge concluded the proceedings, I felt neither triumph nor relief. I simply felt finished. The marriage had ended the moment trust disappeared, long before legal filings or hearings ever began. Everything afterward had been procedure. Walking out of the courthouse, I wasn't celebrating the outcome. I was accepting that the life I once believed would last forever had officially become part of my past, leaving only the responsibility of building something better for my children. Today, my children and I live in a smaller house just outside Franklin. The rooms are quieter, the routines are simpler, and peace has replaced the constant uncertainty that once filled our home. We still eat dinner together, attend soccer games, and spend weekends working on small projects around the house. Those ordinary moments mean more to me now than they ever did before. Lauren eventually moved in with Ryan, but the future she spent so long planning never became the perfect life she imagined. That no longer concerns me. I don't measure my healing by what happened to her. People sometimes ask whether I regret staying calm for so many months. I don't. Anger would have changed nothing. Careful preparation changed everything. I never wanted revenge. I wanted the truth to speak louder than emotion, and in the end, it did. My wife planned every detail of her betrayal. She simply never imagined I had already planned my response.
That's the end of the story. If you made it all the way here, consider subscribing to stay with us. I've placed a couple of recommended videos for you, so pick one and keep watching. I'll see you in the next story.